Dr. Alfonso Amores was something of a legend. He spent years as a surgeon before retiring and getting into hobbies like cave diving in his free time. He was definitely what I would call a daredevil, given his age. At 65 years old, he completed a 330-foot or 100-meter deep dive. But with that larger-than-life spirit came with the urge to push the limits. And that came with doing things like cave diving into technically difficult caves. But not just technically difficult, potentially life-threateningly difficult. Most people have hard boundaries that they will not cross. For divers, some put a full stop to cave diving and will only open water dive. Or maybe they won't go beyond a certain depth. Some will only do certain types of caves where they're not too difficult as long as you do what you're supposed to do. And some absolutely will not ever enter a cave where you have to go against the current to get out. Alfonso wasn't like that. The challenge associated with overcoming the current, pulling you back into the cave at his favorite dive site, was something he enjoyed doing. To know he explored and discovered a cave system few others were able to try was his thing. And he would do that thing with student divers who were helping him set up for a film documentary. But by the end of the trip, he would find himself alone, watching the student divers leave him behind in the Enchanted River. I'm Tatiana Bunch, and this is Occurrence. Before I get started, all sources can be found at occurrencepod.com, which is linked in the show notes, along with other relevant information. And this story was brought to my attention by a viewer on YouTube. If you have episode suggestions, feel free to leave a comment with some information on what it's about. And if I like it and can make it work, I'll consider doing an episode on it. Without further ado, in the Philippines, there's an island named Mindanao. And on that island is a deep spring river called the Hinatuan Enchanted River, or Sacred River. It flows into the Philippine Sea and the Pacific Ocean. So at both ends, it goes into two larger bodies of water. It's 885 feet or 270 meters long. The water is extremely blue and captivating. So captivating that Alfonso's friends said he was captivated by the beauty of this unbelievably blue body of water. The Enchanted River was first explored in 1999, but Alfonso led two other team members in the first exploration of its deeper cave system in February of 2010. During that trip, they discovered a hidden cave opening, 98 feet or 30 meters deep. He made 4 more trips after that, surveying and exploring new tunnels and chambers, and this next trip would be his 6th. Now, Alfonso was from the Philippines, but he didn't live there for a good chunk of his life. He was raised there by a family of 34 people before he moved to America and became a plastic surgeon in West Virginia. He practiced for 20 years as a microsurgery and reconstructive specialist, and during that time, he got married and had several kids. He was trained in cave diving in Florida and wanted to bring that to his local community in the Philippines. Most were open water divers and not cave divers, because traveling to America to be trained was an expense most people couldn't afford. But the environment in Florida was so similar to his home that he believed there had to be a similar cave system there. And he was right. He partially retired when he and his family moved back to the Philippines, and he brought his dream of wanting cave diving to be accessible to everyone who was interested in cave diving and teaching local divers for free. He was a living legend because he pretty much made cave diving possible for the community and got many people involved in expanding interest in it. Alfonso discovered the Pawad underwater cave system in 2002 and literally birthed cave diving culture in the Central Philippines. He co-founded the Filipino Cave Divers, which I'll call FCD, and 2 students from that club were who would be with him on his 6th dive to the cave. The dive was set up for a television crew for a wildlife documentary on the Enchanted River. They wanted access to film the legendary blue water and newly discovered cave system, and Alfonso needed to set up the guidelines for them. In the past, cave training schools would go in and leave their temporary lines, which caused confusion for those new and unfamiliar with the cave. Now, FCD and the City Environment and Natural Resource Office coordinated to simplify the lines and put down permanent ones. They also made rules like temporary lines can be used, but you have to remove them within 24 hours. If they're left for longer than that, the resource office needs to be notified, or the lines would be taken down if they were discovered during an FCD dive. So basically, they needed to make sure things were clear and safe for the film crew to go in, and set up lines to guide them in and out easily. The documentary was kind of a big deal, because the Enchanted River was surrounded by legends. There's one story that says that fairies added the colors of sapphire and jade to the river to give it its unique shade. There's tales of local fishermen reporting fish in the river that couldn't be caught no matter what they tried. And to some locals, the river got its name of being the Enchanted River because of environmental spirits that have the ability to appear in human form, living inside of the river. The legends also say that the river is haunted by supernatural beings who act as its protector. That being said, Alfonso and the 2 students set up to dive, and the doctor was feeling pretty okay. A few weeks before, he was suffering from pneumonia, but now he felt up to doing the dive. This was a guy that, now at 68 years of age, was an extreme diver, piloted his own plane, including seaplanes. He skied, he organized medical missions, he performed free surgeries for those in need. This was a guy who educated children on the importance of the coral reefs and created marine sanctuaries in his free time. So yeah, he had pneumonia, but it was a low tide and the water was so blue and clear, it should be a straightforward dive to someone like Doc. Get in, lay the lines, and get out. So with Alfonso leading the way, they all swam down to the cave system inside of the river. The cave entrance is fairly narrow. Only one person can swim through at a time, but the current pushes into the entrance, making it easy to get inside. After entering the cave, the team encountered the large log that split the chamber into a left and right lane. Beyond that entrance is Doc's door. It's named Doc's door because Alfonso's the one who discovered it, and everyone called him Doc or Doc Boy. So the section named Doc's door connected to a chamber named Mayor's Chamber. Now, the split with the log, you can go to the left or to the right. It's really up to the divers, but it all leads to Doc's door. If you go to the left, it's a bit tighter because it goes a bit closer to the cave walls. To the right is more open, and the path that it goes to Doc's door means that they can kind of descend into that area rather than swim up like they would have to if they went to the left. From here, it's unclear what happened, but it sounds like the current was very strong and they had trouble going down one lane and tried the other, or just had a very difficult time getting through in general. But in any case, the current was way stronger than what they were expecting. It's possible that a buildup of silt and sediment was pushing the water stronger through the area and causing a stronger current in both the left and right lanes. Now, given that they were having such a hard time even getting into the deeper area of the cave system, it's a mystery why they didn't decide to turn back then. When you're trying to swim through a current, and it's difficult to do so, you use up more and more air, and you expend more energy than you would if you weren't exerting yourself against the literal force of nature. Maybe he felt pressured due to needing to get this done for the film crew, or maybe he felt pressure because he thought it would be good exposure for the local community and didn't want to mess up or delay things. But whatever the reason, they pressed on. They made it into Mayor's Chamber, and the chamber itself is about 120 feet long, 100 feet wide, and about 26 feet high. there was sediment settled on the bottom of the chamber. And before you reach the end of it, there's a hill or a cut into the chamber. So it's kind of oval shaped. And then towards the bottom right of that oval, it's as if you carved out a little piece of the oval. That particular little blip is called Kelvin's kneecap. And at the end of Mirror's chamber, it connects to a narrow tunnel called Paul's Passage. And that tunnel descends down. So they get over Kelvin's kneecap and into Paul's Passage and reach a depth of 285 feet or 87 meters. Beyond that hadn't been explored yet. And for that reason, the film crew had no intention of venturing into it. So the team decided to turn back and exit the cave. On the way back, they were heading towards a narrow passage as planned. And suddenly, Doc changed the plan. He ordered the two students with him to go in front of him. And they were surprised, but they didn't argue because he was in charge and he was directing them. And one of the students kind of observed Doc in his movements and noticed he wasn't moving his feet. This obviously was concerning to him and not Doc's usual behavior, so he made an okay hand signal just to see if Doc was okay. And instead of responding saying things were good, he didn't really respond. And then he put his right arm up, telling them to go ahead of him again. And he wasn't going to argue. I mean, he is the student. He has to listen to what the lead diver's telling him to do. So he just decides to continue on with him and the other student. They swim ahead of Doc into Mayor's chamber. And what they didn't know was, while they were down in Paul's Passage, Mayor's chamber developed an even stronger current, one that would require them to use even more air than what they planned for. They continued on, or tried to anyway. The students were able to push on easier than Alfonso, and he just couldn't seem to get back through Doc's door. One of the students tried to help Alfonso, but just couldn't with the current being as strong as it was. Not to mention their air supply was dwindling quickly. He didn't have enough time or energy to stay and get Alfonso out, no matter how much he tried. In diving, you go by the rule of thirds for air supply. You want to have enough air so that you use a third of that air for the trip going to your goal depth. You use another third of air for the trip back. And then you want to keep a third on reserve in case of any holdups or accidents. It's just backup air so that you have enough to make sure you're going to make it out or be able to wait for rescue. But in fighting the current, on the way in and on the way out, the air was running out way faster than they anticipated, and time was of the essence. The students knew they couldn't get Alfonso out, so they left him and went to the surface to call for help. And Alfonso watched them leave. When the rescue divers arrived, the water conditions hadn't improved. The low tide and the river connecting to two larger bodies of water made the current unpredictable and unsafe. Because of that, everyone knew Alfonso's fate was sealed. So the rescuers could only postpone and wait for the conditions to improve. When they returned, they searched for 8 hours until they found Alfonso's remains. Since he was going to be the last one out, he was supposed to coil the rope. But instead, he tied himself to the guideline by his wrist to keep the current from pulling him deeper into the cave. Some speculated he did it for the safety of the rescue divers, so they would be able to get him out safely during the recovery. Others speculate he did it in an effort to be rescued faster. Now, his autopsy showed that he died from a heart attack. And it turns out when he was in his 40s, he had heart problems and underwent heart surgery. That, coupled with the recent fit of pneumonia and struggling to swim against the current for as long as he did, probably all contributed to it. His oxygen tank wasn't even empty, and there were no signs of a struggle. Doc's dream was to teach local divers cave diving, and his wife said after his passing that she received more pledges from friends in the United States and will turn it over to the FCD so they can continue to teach divers in the Philippines. He was actually in the process of writing a book about everything when he died, so to my knowledge, it remains unpublished. And as he was an advocate of preserving the underwater cave system of the Philippines and the marine life inside of it, after his passing, the FCD held its first election for office, and all of the board members made proposals to preserve the systems and allow only certain contracted parties to study what was inside. Later on, they opened up certain areas away from the caves to be available for tourists to be in, even though, on occasion, people have tried sneaking into the cave to dive. Most are usually caught, and in one instance, the people sneaking in with their so-called diving instructor were wearing the wrong equipment. So maybe don't do stuff like that. But that's what happened in the Enchanted River. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, and I'll be back next Thursday.